Good afternoon, councillors, those here in attendance and those who are tuning in. As we meet here today on the unceded lands of the Palawa people, the original and continuing custodians of the land, we open up the meeting at 1 p.m. Thank you. Agenda item number 2 today, merit acknowledgements. I would like to make an acknowledgement today in acknowledging that this week is Homelessness Awareness Week, and to acknowledge the incredible work that our service providers, our professionals, volunteers and the council, and how they work together to continue to work in this complex issue. And I would also like to acknowledge the community and how they are very vocal in their advocacy, and would encourage our community and those who have thoughts to reach out to the council with any ideas and support to help us to work and engage in this complex space. Agenda item number 3, declarations of interest. So as a councillor, we must declare any interest that a councillor has in a matter before any discussion on that matter commences. I believe we have a declaration today. Councillor Harris? 9.4. And Councillor Mackenzie? 15.2. Thank you. Councillor Gibson?
Yeah, thanks. Whilst not a declaration, just for interest, departing at 1:45 for a funeral.
Thank you. Councillor Pentridge, would you like to... at about 1:45? About 1:45. Yep, thank you. Okay. Agenda item number 4, confirmation of minutes. The recommendation is that the minutes of the ordinary meeting of the City of Launceston Council held on the 27th of July be confirmed as true and correct record. Somebody to move? Councillor Palmer. And a seconder? Councillor Harris. Councillor Palmer, would you like to speak to the minutes? Councillor Harris, nobody to speak to the minutes? Okay, putting that one to a vote. All those in favour? That is all councillors present. The motion is carried. Agenda item number 5, council workshops. 5.1, council workshop report from the 3rd of August. So the recommendation is that council notes the council workshops conducted and attended since the last council meeting for the purposes described were Stadiums Tasmania briefing, Key to the City, St Leonard's update, pavers adjacent to Pilgrim Uniting Church Civic Square, Section 75CA, declarations pursuant to the Conveyancing and Law of Property Act 1884. This was for 59 to 61 Frederick Street, Launceston, and controlled parking. Somebody to move the recommendation. Councillor Gibson. A seconder. Councillor Walker. Councillor Gibson, would you like to speak? Councillor Walker?
Just to briefly note, thank you, Chair, that that Stadiums Tasmania briefing, and thanking the committee members of Stadiums Tasmania for that. But to note that this it is yet to be a community conversation in Launceston regarding the future of York Park and its integration into Stadiums Tasmania. And I encourage the people of Launceston to take an active interest as the landscape changes around a future AFL team and the future of York Park to contribute to that conversation as we have it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Any other speakers to the workshops conducted? Councillor Gibson, to close? Okay, putting it to a vote. All those in favour? All councillors present. The motion is carried. Agenda item 6, we have no councillors' leave of absence applications that have been identified as this agenda, and we have no community reports as agenda item number 7 for this week. Agenda item number 8, public question time. 8.1, public questions on notice. You will see there 8.1.1, the question on notice from Malcolm Cowan around the air quality strategy and the response to that in the publicly available agenda. 8.2, public questions without notice. You will note that the rules of engagement are stated and available as you do enter the chamber today, and you may ask a total of 3 questions each. I see Mr. Baines. kicking off our public questions without notice. Just your
Thank you,
name
Mr. Mayor.
and suburb.
Ron Baines, Kings Meadows. Sorry. First, I'd like to congratulate both you and the Deputy Mayor on your positions. It's great to see you both in there. Okay. And I'll probably find a few things to harass the pair of you with in time. But anyway, while watching a program called War on Waste recently, one of the company employees mentioned that aluminium is a very highly valued product for recycling. So with that in mind, I ask, what happens to all the windows, doors, ramps and other products that are made out of aluminium that go on large trucks and then end up at our Launceston tip from various demolition sites in Launceston and from surrounding areas? What happens to it all?
Thank you, Mr. Baines. May I start by saying we don't feel harassed. Your enthusiasm is warranted as a community member, and I do appreciate you taking the time to ask questions. And this question in particular is something that has come up at council, even from development applications that we've seen with beautiful windows and so forth, and looking for a way to help to salvage those. But I might throw that one over to our General Manager to give a little more insight into the actual protocols and practicality of that.
Thank you.
So through the, I'm going to say, there's current mechanisms to separate and recycle that material now, and if it's separated at site, we can deal with all those materials at the Launceston Recovery Centre, and we've actually done trials with the Master Builders Association to show how that can work. The challenge for us is that builders don't want to separate at site. It's an extra cost, it takes space up on their site and extra work. And we have no legal mechanism to require them to separate. So the challenge for us is it comes in mixed loads and we're unable to separate it at this point in time. City of Launceston is a member of the Northern Waste Management Group, and that group that we participate in does see that sorting and separation of what's construction and demolition waste is a huge opportunity into the future. And in terms of its strategic direction, it's one of those things over the next few years that it wants to see better outcomes and more investment in.
Thank you. Number two, what happened to the Thyla signs that were removed from the Brisbane Street Mall?
Great question. So in the last couple of weeks only that we've seen that the Thyla signs have been removed from the Brisbane Street Mall a few months ago, they've actually been going through a pre-fabrication period to ensure that they and the footings for their new home are ready to go. And something that slowed that up a little bit is just the tender of work that is out there for contractors and kind of specific requirements and needs that are for these. And if I can preempt your third question, that they will be going into Civic Square. There has been quite a lengthy report and presentation to the councillors, and I'm really excited to see that in the old fountain, you will see perhaps the first one will be going into there, nice green space around it, because we want them to not only be accessible to our community and a focal and feature for our community, but we want them to be safe. So you'll also see some of these footings and thylacines will be relocated into some of the Civic Square garden beds, whilst we won't perhaps look at encouraging the climbing, but if there is some partaking of that from the children and those young at heart wanting to get up to have a close photo, if they were to fall, we want to ensure that that is risk management. So that's been a big part of this process, is looking into the risk management. But in the last fortnight, you'll see that I believe there's 9 of them that will be relocated very shortly, and they've been going in prefabrication works into Civic Square.
That's very good to hear. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your questions, Mr. Baines. I believe, Councillor Wendy, you've got some questions also without notice.
I'm Wendy McLennan, and I think most of you probably know who I am. And congratulations to both officers for your position.
Now, Wendy, if you could just grab your suburb, even though we know, but
What was that?
just your suburb.
Suburb?
Yeah.
Yes, sorry. I do live in Bridport.
Yep.
However,
Fine.
I do represent a lot of constituents in the Launceston region and the North East. I would like to address the North East Railway. It was found during the appeal of Michael de Montfort versus the Dorset Council that the railway is contaminated with heavy metals and very high levels of arsenic. The Dorset Council planning application that this council approved was for the same railway line, within your jurisdiction. Testing of sites at the 23 river catchments areas between Lilydale Falls and Waina for the current TASCAT appeal has found elevated levels of arsenic and heavy metals. The crushing process of over 5,600 cubic metres, which is equivalent to about 8,000 tonnes of ballast to be removed over the 14 kilometres, will mean that this contamination will leach into the waterways and onto the farmland along the railway. I believe the crucial information that Council needed would have included a preliminary site investigation by the State EPA. Council was presented with a series of overlays from the list site to justify the project. There was no physical testing carried out. I will present you today with correspondence with the Federal Environment Minister in relation to the effect that the leaching of this contamination will have on the native flora and fauna, especially the vulnerable giant freshwater crayfish and the Mount Arthur burrowing crayfish, which is only found in the Pipers, Brid and Boobyalla catchments in the northeast of Tasmania. The series of construction environmental management plans listed in your permit to protect workers during construction and the placement of silt traps, which are actually hay bales, will not prevent the leaching of arsenic, which is water soluble. Surely the Council have a duty of care to future generations and not just the current generation to make sure that what you do meets all standards. And are you comfortable that you're not exposing future generations of farmers, their customers and eventually clients of the track to dangers that you could face some liability for, knowing what you know? Does the Council understand that you have a responsibility under the relevant acts for the potential environmental and health risks that could occur? And are you satisfied that you had sufficient information to make that decision? I believe if you as councillors had access to all the relevant information, it may have led to a different view. And Mr Mayor, I would like to pass out the documents of letters that have been written to the Federal Environment Minister concerning the EPBC Act, which is the protection of flora and fauna, and the fact that they are going to liaise with the Dorset Council, or the Dorset Council Commissioner now, about the fact that that Act needs to be implemented because of the contamination. Thank you very much.
I'm happy for those to be distributed around the table, for sure.
Thank you very much.
In terms of your questions and your statement now, I will say that this council, whilst a contentious and a bit of a split decision has been made, and that was to move forward with. But what we are waiting with anticipation is that the TASCAT case against our decision has only just been made, and we haven't been made aware just yet of the findings from that case just yet. The determination, it hasn't been public, so I'm unaware.
Mr Mayor, have they actually made a decision yet? I don't know.
No.
I
So
don't
that's
think they
currently
have.
going through. So I'm not privy to that information just yet. But in terms of the information that's getting distributed now, this council has acted initially on that next stage. So we'll just await to see how this appeal has gone through the TASCAT as to what, if and any, responses that we can have as a council towards that, because the initial decision has come through council so far. But any information and all information is always important to note and to take into account for that. So thank you for that, and thank you.
And thank you, Mr Mayor. I really appreciate the fact of where it's all standing at the moment. However, I thought it was important to inform you as councillors of the fact that I had contacted the Federal Environment Minister under the EPBC Act.
Thank you. We
Thank you very
appreciate
much.
that. Thank you for coming in. Now, do we have any further questions without notice? Cool. Thank you, Mr Baines. Okay, moving forward now to agenda item number 9, Planning Authority. So under the provisions of the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act of 1993, Council acts as a planning authority in regard to items including in agenda item number 9, Planning Authority. So 9.1, we have the prospect rezone land described as for CT 51268.3 and CT 5268-4 for the particular purpose zone, which is the prospect business precinct to the low density residential zone. Do we have anybody from the public to speak on 9.1 before we go to the recommendation? There being no public speakers, the recommendation is to agree to rezone land at 181 Westbury Road Prospect to the low density residential zone. Do I have somebody to move the recommendation? A mover? We have Deputy Mayor. A seconder? Councillor Pentridge. Deputy Mayor, would you like to speak as the mover?
Thank you, Mayor. I speak to, I guess, endorse the recommendation that's been made, noting that this is the first leg of a process which will get further advertising in a 28-day period for the community to make its views known in regards to the block of land. We've all seen the shape of the block of land and the way it folds around other blocks of land, and in its own sense, other than for the purpose it was probably used for prior, it probably doesn't have a useful purpose in the current zoning application or current zone that it is zoned under. The land is, I guess, effectively owned by the same owner, I think, as 181, and therefore by joining those two together to make a decent sized subdivision makes a lot of sense from my perspective. And given that land for residential purposes is at a premium in and around Launceston, and this is logical to have a block of land such as this in the areas there. It's got services nearby, bus routes, shopping centres, etc. nearby. The fact that it is low density res also, I think, adds a different character to some of the residential blocks that are existing in the area, but also gives people an opportunity to have a choice of something slightly different. And as you also note, as you go through there are a lot of bars to jump over in relation to getting this through the process that council officers need to look at, respond to, and as you can see, the various responses. I guess probably the major thing was the vegetation overlay, which was recorded as being a sensitive vegetation. A large part of that has already been destroyed through fire and other manners. But by making these low residential, that habitat that's there is able to be maintained because the building blocks will be outside of that area. And anybody who puts in a DA, if this is low residential, will still need to go through and meet those environmental overlays that are on the property. So to me, this is a logical step to make with this block of land, and will open up and make a number of low residential blocks in an area where I think it's quite appropriate. And we'll probably see as time goes by with, I guess, the other properties, which are some of those are commercial at the moment, where the agriculture department lies, given a large part of that's going to go out to UTAS, will probably find its way into this space at some stage in the future. But I think looking at this block on its own, I think it's a very sensible application that's been put in. It's been well researched and reported on by our officers, and I support it going to public comment.
Councillor Pentridge is the seconder. Would you like to speak? Any other speakers to the item? Councillor Walker.
Yes, certainly I agree with the previous speaker. Thank you, Chair. In regards to the appropriate use of that land and the rezoning to enable that to occur, I do note that in the reporting, the subject site and surrounding uses, it says the lots form part of a 2,872 hectare site, which I think might be incorrect, but I'm happy to stand corrected on that. But I think there may be a slight error there, and I don't wish to dwell on that, just to let you know that on page 16 that description is there. Nonetheless, it is the lot does form part of a site which is made up of 4 titles. This seems to be an appropriate use. The surrounding area use is of the same or very similar. Providing additional house lots so close to the city is great. We don't yet have to, I imagine, consider the access in terms of traffic purposes for this rezoning. So that's something that will come with a future development application, and I look forward to it. Thank you, Chair.
Any other speakers? Deputy Mayor to close. Okay, putting it to the vote then. All those in favour? All councillors present? The motion's carried. 9.2. So we are looking at the amendment site-specific qualification to the Launceston Local Provision Scheme to allow the hospital services use class as a discretionary and qualified use within the commercial zone on Wellington Street in Launceston. Anybody from the public to speak on agenda item 9.2? There being none, the recommendation is to make the recommendation to the Tasmanian Planning Commission subsequent to the public exhibition period for a draft amendment to Launceston Provision Scheme. Do I have somebody to move the recommendation? Councillor Gibson. A seconder? Councillor Pentridge. Councillor Gibson, would you like to speak?
Thanks. I note that there were no representations received. We obviously considered this at a June meeting. It was advertised in line with the Act. No one had issue with it, neither positive nor negative, and so as per the recommendation, should be approved as proposed.
Thank you. Councillor Pentridge? Any other speakers? Councillor Walker?
Thank you, Chair, and I do rise to support this change of use amendment to the local provisions to allow the use class of hospital services at this site in Wellington Street. I do note that, of course, state government is beginning a 10-year process of investment and redesign of the hospital precinct, as you might call it, and increasingly this area in South Launceston is being seen and indeed named as a health precinct, something that we don't have an official council policy on or attitude towards, as much as we might tacitly accept that. As a resident of South Launceston, I would certainly like to see the council adopt a strategy around that in conjunction with the state government and the work that they are doing, as well as the great investment that other entrepreneurs and medical professionals are making in the area. I can see that this will attract other professionals to the area, and I would like to think that the council can, as a result, take a proactive lead in that process, to consider not just the residents, such as myself, but traffic movements in the area and the ease of access when it comes to patients and visitors alike. Thank you, Mayor.
Any other speakers? Councillor Gibson to close. Okay, putting it to the vote then. All of those in favour? Please, all councillors present, the motion is carried. Agenda item 9.3, which is Campbell Street Newstead installation of a digital sign. This is a retrospective DA. Do we have any speakers from the public? You're right, Kaz, don't need to say anything?
Yeah, okay.
Thank you, Mayor, and congratulations again on your appointment and for yourself as well, Deputy Mayor. All of the details that you need for your deliberation.
Kaz, just your name and suburb.
Casimir Douglas and Prospect. So yes, all the information that you need for your deliberations and considerations are obviously laid out in front of you, but just wanted to provide some context for our decision regarding the installation of the sign, which is really informed by community. I think we can all acknowledge the dramatic impact that COVID-19 had on the mental health and learning of our students, but perhaps the effect that we're seeing most pronounced now is the engagement of the broader community with our school and with our parents. So we've implemented a range of strategies to try and connect with the broader community, and this is just one amongst those strategies. There's a saying that says, when the principal sneezes, everyone catches a cold. And that is a way to say that where the principal's priority is, that's where the priority of the school and the community is. And my priority is certainly with our school, building our community and connecting with the broader community. And that's just the way that I've lived my life. I was a charter member of the Rotaract Club of Tamar Sunrise. I work with the homeless every month with the Vinnie's van. I'm an active member of the arts community. I have the great privilege of being giving the opening address for Singfest in next month, which is a wonderful community event where our school choirs compete against each other. The Mayor himself was at my school yesterday for our Catholic Education Week Mass, where I was playing the music for the Mass and enjoyed bringing our community together for that event. I coach my son's soccer team for the Launceston City Football Club, where I'm also a junior committee member. I run the junior engagement activities as part of the club when the senior team plays, including halftime heroes. And these are not just things I do in our community, because it's the right thing to do or want to be perceived a certain way. It's because I'm, as a principal, as an educator, called to model for my students how it is we can best contribute positively to our local community. And so this, please see as symptomatic of myself and our school and our focus on engaging with the broader community to make them aware of what's happening in the life of our school and connecting them more deeply and personally with their child's education. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Okay, to the recommendation to consider and approve the development application around the Land Use Planning Act approvals of 1993 with the recommended conditions. Mover, Councillor Dawkins. And seconder, Councillor Gibson. Councillor Dawkins is the mover.
Thank you. As councillors more experienced and less would know, we don't like seeing retrospective applications. We prefer people to go through a process where they understand what it is, what their obligations are under the Act, and they come to council with those plans. Having said that, it's not uncommon for these kinds of activities to take place and for us to be able to make a decision based on the fact that they're already in situ, not on a plan. The representations were quite broad, actually. I think that's probably one of the deepest and broadest sets of representations against a sign that we've seen on council. Some of them were around the incorrect placing, the colour. They didn't believe that there needed to be another form of communication from the school, but in the end, those kinds of things mostly were relevant under the scheme, and especially considering that the sign was already in situ, it's very difficult for us to say, well, yes, 1 metre either way might be a reasonable proposal at this point, when, of course, if it's going to be approved, it needs to be approved in the site that it's in when it's retrospective. So as I said, it's been recommended for approval. We would prefer our community citizens to understand their obligations and to come to council with the appropriate paperwork at the beginning, not at the end.
Thank you. Councillor Gibson, the seconder.
Thanks for the opportunity to add further to what Councillor Dawkins has said. Look, for me, obviously it's retrospective, but certainly I think the school or the Catholic Education Office rings up a signage provider and expects them to understand the requirements of their LGA. That's the learning for me and hopefully for them in this instance, that the provider of the sign, Flying Colours, who hopefully will take something from today's process that the school have needed to go through. For me, I take strength from the fact that in point 2 of the conditions regarding signage content, use limitation, and importantly, the prohibited image or message, the sign message changes, and most importantly, the light spillage from the illuminated sign, that there are enough controls that are contained within not only the report, but indeed also from the school themselves, who have explained very clearly to the representatives, to us, how the sign will be used, obviously the purpose of the sign, but importantly that the sign won't change more than it needs to. I think that's clearly spelled out, and importantly will be turned off at night. So for those that had concerns with regard to that, I think that's contained there. But hopefully to our signage providers in the city, of which there are many, today is taken as a learning, particularly when a great deal of money is spent by applicants. They expect probity and ensuring that the service that they're receiving is transparent, and indeed that where a DA is required to be lodged, that the company would inform them of that.
Thank you. Further speakers around the table? Councillor Mackenzie.
Again, I won't harp on about the retrospectivity, and I think Councillor Gibson and Dawkins have probably mentioned, I think, the appropriate comments in relation to that. And noting that we had 4 representations, which were in effect 2, because there were 2 families, and not wishing to take away from their right, because they obviously live somewhere very close to the school and therefore see that sign every day when they come out of their house. But I also note the comments that were made and the responses made by the school in relation to those issues, and some were probably, I think, were misguided or misunderstood in relation to what some of those signage aspects were doing. I think working through the process and listening to the representatives, there's been a number of modifications like the brightness the times the signs go on and off during the day, because they'll be only 7 a.m. till 6 p.m. So therefore, from the perspective of any light going into people's houses during times when people want to sleep and so forth like that. So I think the school's been very considerate and thoughtful in relation to what's going on. I mean, signs in residential areas of illumination are not necessarily something that are great, but I also noticed, and the comments also made by the school, that pretty well every other school around the city has similar types of signage that exist, and they are to inform their community about what's going on. I think the fact that there's only, I think, 1 or 2 iterations of the sign that happen each day, I think is also another positive. I don't believe from our officer's point of view there's any concern about traffic and its attention to the road as they drive past a very busy place. So that would be my only issue in relation to safety. The size, I think, has been well explained on the fact that they're sitting behind a fence and therefore needed to be raised higher than probably a standard height so that the sign could actually be visible above the fence. So all of that seemed to make sense to me. I think the school have answered the issues raised by the representation in a sensitive and a clear manner, and I think have worked with those comments to try and improve the aspects for all involved. So I will be supporting this today.
Any other speakers? Councillor Dawkins to close. Okay, putting it to the vote then. All of those in favour? It is all councillors present. Motion is carried. 9.4, noting a declared interest from Councillor Harris, who leaves the room. We are looking at the initiative draft amendment to rezone land at Howard Street, Montague Street, as part of the southern portion of Main Street in Vermey, for general residential zone to light industrial zone. Do we have any public speakers? There being none, moving to the recommendation, which is to make a recommendation to the Tasmanian Planning Commission for a draft amendment to the Launceston Local Provisions Schedule. Do I have somebody to move the recommendation? Councillor McKenzie, Deputy Mayor. A seconder? Councillor Pentridge. Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you, Mayor. I raised to support the motion to send it on to the Tasmanian Planning Scheme Office to review. I note that we had one objection in the period, or one representation in the period, who raised a number of issues in regards to their property. And to be fair, their property is probably the most significantly impacted by the development application or the proposed zone change. And whilst I am concerned and I feel for those people in regards to the impact or the change that we'll have, what we in fact have is a number of derelict properties in that area which, if they were to be removed and rebuilt, would need to be built in a different way to, I think, 2.8 or 3, whatever the flood restriction height is, and therefore would be a significantly different build and higher than what currently exists in that area. And therefore, to build residences that are there, because I think the properties are probably beyond repair in their own manner, would be problematic. So therefore, a change in use makes sense. I think the other issue was in relation to looking at a colour bond roof. I think if everybody looks at the landscaping plan, that along that Howard Street property there is landscaping proposed in front of the wall, so the wall's set back from the street, and therefore there's plantings with some beautiful maple trees, I think, were part of that, which I think would be a lovely adjunct to the area. Arguably, it'll take a little while for that to happen, so there will be a level of discomfort first days looking out there until the trees establish themselves. So I appreciate that will be potentially an issue for a wee while, but again, there's been sensitive thinking about what the future looks like in regards to those properties, so an appropriate landscaping plan has been put in place. I think there was a comment in relation to taking out housing from our land bank, which I think explained by the flood issue, but also further explained by the bank further down the bottom of Howard Street, where they're actually going to place more houses. So the reality of it is we're actually taking some residential away and replacing it with other residential, I think maybe more residential opportunities than currently exist there. So whilst I do appreciate the comments made by the representative and the impact that it will have on her or their building. I think the overall plan in relation to the street, because it is a mixed use. Montague Street does have industrial or light industrial activity that already goes on in that area. So there is a level of that already exists that people living on the corner can actually see now. So it's not as if it's a complete change to the landscape that they look at. So whilst there are some misgivings in relation to an impact on a property, I think the overall plan, I think, is a very sensible use of the land included, and I'm happy to support the motion.
Councillor Pentridge is the seconder.
I think it's been covered, so I tend to agree with everything that's been said.
Further speakers around the table? Councillor Walker.
Yeah, I certainly think the previous speaker might have covered off on every possible angle. I was waiting to see if there was something more I could add, of which there is very little, but I will say that normally, I would not, be that supportive, and I'm sure most people aren't, of losing housing stock, but in this case, we are gaining land that is outside the flood zone.
Yep.
Will provide more housing, and I do sympathise with those people on Howard Street who will be looking out towards a light industrial building, 6 metres or so in height, maybe a little bit taller, but it will be mitigated by the landscaping. It is a light industrial area, as they would obviously well know, and as I say, do sympathise with the change, but in this case, those impacts, certainly not in terms of light, and it marginally changes the use of Howard Street, but at the same time creates additional flood-free housing options for Launceston. Thank you, Mayor.
Any further speakers to the item? Deputy Mayor to close. Okay, putting it to the vote then. All of those in favour? That is all councillors present. The motion is carried. We welcome back Councillor Harris, and Council no longer sits as Planning Authority. Agenda item number 10, announcements by the Mayor. Mayor's announcements 10.1. You'll see in there another very busy fortnight for our community, starting off with the Wilson's Home official opening cocktail event down there opposite the old Video City. Friday we had the UTAS opening of the River's Edge building at Inveresk, Junction Arts Festival launch at Duquesne. We had also the Assembly 197. They shared some work before it gets to stage. It was a really pleasant insight into the work that they're doing and a community focus around that work also. Saturday the 29th, we had the Launceston Club meeting, and it was a terribly wet day, but it was a fantastic day, and it was great to see the work that they're doing out there in the community also. On Monday the 31st, we were lucky enough to meet with KG and Chiago as a part of their visit from our sister city in Ikeda. It was great to see how they were spending time in our schools, as well as the way that they were looking around our city. On Wednesday the 2nd, we went to Ascent by Sydney Dance Company at the Princess Theatre, which was phenomenal. Thursday the 3rd was the Salvo's Sleep Out just out here at Civic Square. And again, as a part of Homelessness Awareness Week, we do give a shout out to those who are working actively in this space. Friday the 4th, agriculture. It took over the city and also the regional landscapes, which was fantastic to have the conversations and head along to the city opening, as well as the closing at the Pilgrim Church. And then we headed out to Fire and Fog, which was a little wet, but still quite well attended, which was great. Also, in between that, we officiated the Queen Victoria Museum and Art Gallery launch of the Spiritual Patterns, something that I resonate with, something quite a bit darker with our First Nations and the storytelling throughout the land and sea story. On Saturday, we headed out to the Flood Resilience Movement with Farm at the Ravenswood Community Shed, which was fantastic. And then also out to the community house. And it was great to see how the community embraces the northern suburbs and the incredible work. And I might make note of Councillor Mackenzie, who was unfortunately away for that event, but he did get some really nice words from the community and the work that he does out there. We attended the rivalry match between Georgetown and Hillwood after that one, as guests of the Georgetown Mayor and CEO. Condolences to the reserves and the seniors because they almost both got beaten by 100 points each. But it was a great day to be out there and to continue the relationships that we do have with our partnering councils. We also got to see, as Kaz mentioned, the Catholic Education Week heading along to Mass yesterday. There was a meet and greet with the councillors, with the Chamber of Commerce Board yesterday, with an update as to the projects that are going forward and the agendas that we have here as City Council. Last night, headed along to the opening night of Launceston College production of Be More Chill at the Princess Theatre, and I can say, having come through that process myself, this was probably one of the best overall casts, particularly the leads that I've ever seen. Was a little jealous. They are freaks because they're amazing. So if you get a chance to head along, it was a fantastic production, as we've come to expect, but particularly from not only the ensemble, but the leads in that one. Also, we headed along this morning to walk to raise awareness for the homeless, and it was incredible to see those councillors who were able to attend and to see the service providers and the work that they're doing in the local community, as we've mentioned, with this complex issue. And just one that I missed on Monday, the 7th, attended the Housing Ends Homelessness Catholic Care Tas morning tea presentation here in Town Hall. So another really busy couple of weeks for our community, and it's great to have the opportunity to head along and to grab those first-hand insights to what's going on and what's important, what's happening in our community. So as a part of that, agenda item number 11, councillors' reports. Do we have some reports? Councillor Dawkins?
Thank you. I represented council on Friday night at the agriculture event, which was the launch of the Flavours of Launceston, made possible by our fantastic grants team and our process for being able to allocate funds into the community. But we ate food from the booklet, and obviously this is an online menu as well. No, it's not a menu, recipe book. So it can be updated as it needs to be. And it means there's a living, breathing document that people can add to whenever they want to. So a fantastic night. It was an alcohol-free night with lots and lots of fresh food. We need more events like that in our community. It was absolutely fantastic, and I congratulate Joe Dean and the team.
Can I just quickly add note to that one as well, Councillor Dawkins, how excited they were upon your availability to head out there, which is fantastic. Further councillor reports? Councillor Walker?
Yes, along with yourself, was attending the opening of agriculture, but I did stay all day. I know that you had many other meetings of the day, and you did ask for a report, so I'm doing that now. Thank you, Mayor. From the opening plenary, public speaker of Jus Bakker, is I think how you say his name, which really set the scene for different ways of looking at sustainability in agriculture and bringing food to the plates of restaurateurs. He's well known for creating restaurants that create their own food, grow their own food, and then serve it on the plate and things like that. So that was certainly fascinating. But for me, through the day, being involved in some of the sessions when it comes to agritourism, it became apparent that the breadth and width of different entrepreneurs out there on small holdings and larger holdings trying different things. We all know about that, but the difficulties that they face, and certainly local council did get a mention quite a few times when it comes to impediments towards being able to do something different, because quite often what they're attempting to do is new. It hasn't been done before. It might be accommodation in an unusual situation on a farm. It might be two businesses working together to provide an experience that need to face different liabilities and things like that. The barriers for starting a new business, probably start at about $30,000, not just council fees and things, but all sorts of different assessments, and the list is quite long when it comes to those type of things. But it can go up to more like $100,000 for someone who wants to start this type of agritourism business on their property. So it's certainly something for council to bear in mind. It was eye-opening to see that. Well, ear-opening to hear it, maybe you would say. And I would certainly, at some point, appreciate councillors being able to get that feedback from agriculture. I think as we do pride ourselves as being the region in Tasmania that is the food bowl of Tasmania, and it is providing those rich and varied experiences. So too, we should be made aware of their challenges. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. And just noting the time, Councillor Gibson, Councillor Pentridge, did you have I'm giving you the opportunity now because I know that you're stretched for time, but did you have a councillor report?
I do. Would that be possible, rather than rush through it? Because I think this will keep coming back. Can we defer this till next time and then I can present it?
Thank you.
Instead of just throwing a heap of that into
No
it.
worries.
But thank you.
Yep. Okay, thank you, Councillor Pentridge. Just noting that Councillor Pentridge and Councillor Gibson just heading off for those listening. Councillor Kai, you had a community report?
Yes, please.
Can I just ask someone just bump Councillor Pentridge's microphone?
On Monday, the 7th of August, together with Mayor Garwood and Councillor Harris, we joined the Catholic Cares Morning Tea information session to acknowledge National Homelessness Week. We listened as people shared their experiences and struggles with homelessness, different examples of situations that have resulted in people being homeless, and the challenges they face each day just to get by was heartbreaking and extremely difficult when children are involved. It makes people question their self-worth and their dignity. Homelessness hit pretty close to home for me too, with my own personal experience. In 2014, we were building a one-storey on top of our restaurant. Our builder was the first builder in Tasmania to do a runner. He filed for bankruptcy and started a trend where many more builders followed. The liquidators acknowledged that they owed us over $260,000, but the payout was less than 1%, so we received a cheque for $2,000. That money he owed us was the bank's money, not ours. So as a result, we lost our family home of 15 years to pay the bank back and had to start all over again. This is the first time I'm sharing my story in public because for a long time, I felt responsible for this happening and for putting my family through hell. I now understand what happened was not my fault and I no longer blame myself. It was not easy to...
That's right, Susie.
It was not easy to overcome the anxiety and depression that came with the frustration of losing everything. But I am proud that I've managed to overcome that difficult time, which was affecting my self-esteem and confidence. I call this one of my life lessons, and in this lesson, I have learned to be strong and resilient. No matter what life throws at you, you wipe away your tears and you pull yourself out of that hole, which is what I did. Some people would say I was very unlucky, but I would say I was very fortunate that my family didn't end up living on the streets. I have confidence that Council will continue working with organisations to offer assistance to individuals, parents and children who find themselves in these difficult situations, regardless of their past unfortunate circumstances. Everyone deserves a roof over their head. Nobody should be left out. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kai. Any other councillor reports? There being none, we'll move forward to agenda item number 12. Questions by councillors. 12.1, councillors' questions on notice. You'll see a response at 12.1.1 to Councillor Pentridge's question around dredging. 12.2, councillors' questions without notice. Okay, Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Mayor. Can you provide an update on the closure of the gorge walkway from Kings Bridge to the First Basin due to the failure of the private retaining wall on South West Drive? And if possible, a reopening date when our residents might expect the trail to be reopened?
Absolutely. Thank you for your question, Councillor Harris. I will direct that to the CEO as we're working incredibly hard in this space, but another complex range of issues.
Yeah, that's right, Mayor. As the Mayor said, yeah, we are working through it. We haven't got a date yet determined in respect of the reopening of the walkway. What I can say is, though, we've had movement sensors attached to the retaining wall for the last few weeks that it's showing that it still is having daily movement. So we've got specific or specialist engineering advice being sought. We're working with our people at the moment. So we do hope to have a solution and an answer in respect of the timeframes associated with the work, but we have to identify what that work is first. So we will have an answer in the next few weeks, but it is a bit fluid at the moment.
Can I just add to that also, the fact that council has got involved with this issue is a reflection on how important it is for our community to have that access, and that whilst this is on private land, again, council getting involved understands the issue with something that is such an asset, not only to our tourists, but our identity. So I thank the council officers and the workers for the work they're doing in that space already, because it's difficult. Thank you, Councillor Harris. Councillor Dawkins?
Thank you. I'm not sure how many people are familiar with the Loud Fence campaign, but it was initiated in Ballarat around 2019. It's to show solidarity for child sex abuse survivors, and it's a fence where you tie a ribbon to show that you walk alongside people who have had these kind of events occur in their lives. So there's an understanding that the Loud Fences are coming to Launceston, and I need to understand, in our community of survivors need to understand what council's position will be when those fences start appearing.
Fantastic. Thank you. And thank you for bringing that to the awareness to council as well. And just to do a slight sort of something that's happened recently around council's involvement with memorials and ensuring that our community understands that when they see council officers around these areas, that the position is to keep them there and to ensure that the safety and the betterment of our community is a part of the process of that securement, that we are not directing and haven't directed them to be taken down. But I might pass this one to our CEO to ensure that he has a reflection from the officer's point of view.
Thanks, Mayor. So as the Mayor said, we obviously have informal memorials that occur on a frequent basis for various causes and means. Certainly there's no problem from a council perspective with informal memorials being established, and we'll work with the memorial being the different situations that do get created. Certainly from a council's perspective, they are informal and they're temporary. So we would certainly leave them there for a respectful period of time, and generally that they'll be removed after a period of time has elapsed. But certainly from an initiative point of view, there's no problem from a council's perspective with that the Loud Fence being supported. So.
Councillor Britton?
Thank you very much. Look, I wasn't here when the North East Railway was discussed, but just after what was said this morning, I was wondering if in the future there are any repercussions for the decision from any leakage of chemicals and stuff from the railway. Will the Launceston City Council in any way be held accountable, or who will actually pay reparations or anything like that if what they've said is true?
CEO, you're probably working more actively in this space.
Look, not for quite some time in terms of, obviously, the assessment that was undertaken by the council was supported by evidence and advice that was provided as part of the application. Obviously, it made its decision cognizant of all facts and evidence available to it at the time. There are conditions that are placed on the permit that in respect of any potential on-site contamination. So that's the rest with the applicant in respect of controls that they need to they need to adhere to. The letter that was provided today is merely an explanation of the system that operates across Australia with respect to threatened species management. So that obviously has a role to play if they determine that it is to be called in, but that's really a matter for the federal government as to whether that happens or not. But in terms of any liability, I believe that the council's assessment and the resultant conditions has ensured that it's considered that as part of our approval.
Any further questions? Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mayor. Just as an adjunct to that, does our council's relationship with Dorset Council, now that they have been put into suspension, have any bearing or impact onto the decisions, not just for the railway, but any ongoing relationships with Dorset Council that we may have? Is there any
in what sort of aspect?
I'm just asking if there's any impact into the process for Launceston City Council's interaction. We do interact with them when it comes to various mechanisms, including, I suppose, in that instance, their approved application to develop a parking area in Lilydale Falls Reserve, for example. So can the CEO foresee any impacts from their suspension?
Yeah.
No, so certainly from a council perspective, we, from a CEOs and general managers perspective, we meet every 5 weeks as a northern group. So the Dorset has been represented on that and continues to be by John Marrick. Obviously, he's now interacting with Andrew Wardlaw, and so with respect to that, I don't think it will change in terms of how we interact with the council.
And one more, if I may. Thank you, Mayor. It's been previously answered that the $130 million that would be that is allocated to York Park for the improvement of the stadium is sort of guaranteed regardless of York Park's inclusion with Stadiums Tasmania. If indeed York Park does become part of Stadiums Tasmania, how will Launceston community and indeed Launceston Council maintain its input and impact into the design and the outcomes in regards to that development?
In terms of the development, I know that we've been speaking for several months around the MOU, and I believe that we're getting to a point now where it will be presented to council after a few different back and forths in terms of content, but perhaps CEO in terms of infrastructure and development as to the going forth inclusion as to council, what sort of position we'll have to recommend and that sort of thing. You might be more in detail to that.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, certainly have been involved and can shed some further light on that. So obviously, whilst we still own the stadium, and we do currently, obviously we're fully engaged in respect of that design process. So I sit on the steering committee that's doing that work, and Robert Groenewegen, obviously with his expertise around the stadium, is providing that technical and professional input into that. In terms of a transition, if the stadium transitions in terms of ownership and governance to Stadiums Tasmania, certainly from our communications with Michael Maloof, and he only mentioned that at the workshop with us last week, their intention is to formalise an engagement committee of whatever that looks like with the local community that would involve the City of Launceston. So our mechanism would be best through that committee to engage directly with the board. But again, there's still a lot that has to play out till that's formed, as you said. But that would be the way I would see the input still coming through council and directly into the board for them to then consider.
Deputy Mayor.
To follow on that, presumably a DA would need to be put out anyway, which we'd have to assess at some stage. So any development would need to come back to this council anyway.
No further questions? Moving on to agenda item number 13, committee reports. 13.1, Access Advisory Committee. The recommendation is that council receive the report from the Access Advisory Committee, meetings held on the 8th of March and 7th of June. Do I have somebody to move? Councillor Dawkins, a seconder? Councillor Mackenzie. Councillor Dawkins?
The Access Committee failed to reach a quorum on both the 8th of March and 7th of June, which is really disappointing. It's a number of factors, so not the same reasons. And really all we can take from this is that we need to now step back and have a look at the way that we engage with our diverse community and ensure that we're doing absolutely everything we can to make it a fit-for-purpose committee. I think there's probably more that we can do now around specifics, so whether or not we're looking at digital access and look at projects and whether we bring people in on that sort of basis to have a look at specific projects. But yes, so next time I report on this, I really hope I've got something far more interesting and deep to tell you. But at the moment, it feels like we've slightly lost our way, but we're not going to give up.
Okay. Thank you, though. Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for that comment, Councillor Dawkins. Having been involved in the Access Committee for a number of years myself, and the value that it's actually served our community in many ways over that time, to see it sort of getting to a stage where now quorums are there, would suggest to me that the time and the life cycle of that particular committee and the way it operates may not necessarily be relevant. And I can, recall in the past, committees of council are there for the benefit of the greater community and council in regards to what they do. And when they don't serve that purpose any longer, you move to make them fit what we need to do. And I can recall the Heritage Advisory, the Heritage Forest Committee. We wound up in the last council. Prior to that, the York Park Ingress Precinct Authority was wound up because the purpose that it was set up for was no longer relevant. So I think that probably what Councillor Dawkins is leaning towards is the fact that the way that we deal with access, the way we deal with the people who have access issues within our community needs to change to meet what they require, making sure that we as a council are cognizant of the access issues relating to all our council area. And I think probably another way will come up which will actually serve us better into the future. But while we've got it, and I certainly acknowledge the work of all those people that have been on the Access Committee over many years, because they've contributed greatly to what our city is and how accessible it is in many ways. But I acknowledge the difficulties and making sure that we do things which are current for the times that we exist in.
Any other speakers to the item? Councillor Dawkins to close. Okay, putting the recommendation to the vote, the motion. All those in favour? That is all councillors present. The motion is carried. Agenda item 14, Infrastructure and Assets Network. 14.1 is the Launceston Flood Authority report. The recommendation is that council will receive the Launceston Flood Authority quarterly report, April to June 2023. Do I have somebody to move? Thank you, Councillor Britton. A seconder, Councillor Harris. Councillor Britton, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Mayor. Only briefly, just to say that I think the Flood Authority do a good job. It's interesting to see something I wanted to see when I first got it was well, it says here a forward-facing, public-facing dashboard that can help us during a flood event or any disaster. And they've received the funding, and that's obviously going to be something they're working towards. So there's plenty more in there. The penstock and the levee walls all being repaired. But yeah, good work. Thanks very much.
Councillor Harris is the seconder. Would you like to close with any? Oh, no speakers. Okay, Deputy Mayor.
I'm just going to make a comment. I think Councillor Pentridge is not here because he asked what the Flood Authority actually did, I think, a few meetings ago, and I think it outlines well in this report what they actually do. So I think that it just acknowledges that they do have a purpose in what we do. They're funded by state and governments and looking at making sure our levee protection is in place and other things as well. I think the report sort of outlines it very well. So it's just a pity. Hopefully Councillor Pentridge read the report before he left.
Councillor Walker?
Yes, I'm sure. Like my previous speaker, none of us wish to speak on Councillor Pentridge's behalf. Nonetheless, he did point out, through you, Chair, that the Flood Authority, it is still in their charter that they do maintain dredging in terms of mitigating flood risks to Launceston. So that is something that needs to be addressed one way or another. I won't sort of presuppose how that may be. we note a lot of the work that has been done between when it was April and June this year in this report, and that is great. I note one thing it does say, and I will ask a question, stormwater detention basin vegetation management, RFQ, closed in June. Which detention basin does the Flood Authority manage? Is it all of them, or is it a particular one?
General Manager Shane.
Well, they don't manage any, so it's we council staff manage levy assets, of course. So it's levy and stormwater detention basins, of which council maintain many. So it's just to get economies of scale, putting the two contracts together. So all the detention basins, of which we have 6, 7, 8. They're just part of the overall contract, but the City of Launceston responsibilities.
So to be clear, the Flood Authority doesn't manage the detention basins.
They manage flood levies. However, as the two are managed, they both manage as dams. They're both structures that hold back water. They're both permitted under the legislation as dams, and therefore they're managed consistently across both asset groups.
Thank you for that. And yeah, I do note some of the challenges that are in this report for the Flood Authority with land that does continue to move and behave unpredictably. So I certainly thank them for their work. And I do believe that this conversation will be continuing, I suppose, as we do assess the role of the Flood Authority and how that may change given the nature of the changing way that we are viewing the river. But I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Mayor.
Further questions around the table? Councillor Britton to close.
Thank you very much, and I'm sure we all would have been a little bit interested to see what would have been said had someone else was here. But all I will say is that I think it is the Flood Authority's job at the moment to look after Launceston and do what they can in their scope to prepare us for a flood. I know state and local government have a hard enough time even trying to talk to anyone about dredging or silt raking at the moment, and I don't believe that responsibility falls upon them. So I'll give them credit where credit's due. They do a good job. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Putting the motion to the vote. All of those in favour? That is all councillors present. The motion is carried. 15 on the agenda, Organisational Services Network. 15.1 is budget amendments. The recommendation is for council to consider and approve by absolute majority, so we'll need 7 today, that council makes those changes to the 23-24 statutory estimates. Somebody to move the motion, that is, move the recommendation. Deputy Mayor, a seconder? Councillor Britton? Deputy Mayor.
I think this is simply putting back in what we took out in the last in our last meeting, which is really just assuming that we were going to get some funding last year, which we didn't get because the projects hadn't advanced to the level to receive that funding, and we're anticipating to get that funding this year because we're anticipating to do the projects this year.
Okay. Councillor Britton, nothing as the seconder. Any other speakers to the item? Nothing. Yes, Councillor Walker?
I will speak to the item, thank you. And I will note that I was going to ask that question because I thought, didn't we just do this 2 weeks ago? But of course, we took them out of that existing budget and they go into the new financial year budget. The question I asked at the time was, did we think in so doing that there's a presumption that all of this external funding is still readily available to us? And I can only presume that answer would be the same, considering that they are now being introduced into this year's budget. But as we note, the Aboriginal upgrade, there is a funding shortfall there. There will be concerns that for other of these projects, depending on their necessity and their desirability or otherwise, that there may be funding shortfalls as a result. So I suppose that's just something that we have to monitor over the coming months. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Any further comments around the table? Speakers? Deputy Mayor, to close? Okay. Bring the motion to the vote. All of those in favour? By absolute majority, that is all councillors present. Motion is carried. 15.2, the lease at 341 Vermont Road, Ravenswood. The recommendation is to consider subleasing and to approve by absolute majority once again the property situated at 341 Vermont Road, Ravenswood, known as the Ravenswood Memorial Hall, to Starting Point Neighbourhood House Incorporated. Somebody to move the recommendation. Councillor Harris. A seconder. Councillor Kai. Councillor Harris.
Thank you. This is I guess, come back to us because after 5 years their current lease is expiring, where we have leased the old hall on Vermont Road to what is the men's shed and also community garden, as most people would know it, to the, and I'll better get the right house, the Starting Point Neighbourhood House Incorporated. I didn't actually know there was a name. So there you go. We all learn something every day. So I'm quite happy that the way they've looked after the property, they've enhanced it. They provide a great service to the community, both with their men's shed, but also the community garden. And I encourage everyone around the table to support this motion. Thank you.
Noting also the absence of Councillor Mackenzie as a worker in the northern suburbs, declaring an interest. Yeah, that's the chair. Councillor Kai is the seconder. Any other speakers to the item? Councillor Harris, anything further? Just to note the incredible work that Peter's doing there, particularly with the gardens. We are putting that one to the vote. All of those in favour? That is all councillors present. 2, 3, 4, 7, 8. And absolute majority is reached by an extra one. As Councillor Mackenzie returns, the motion is carried. 15.3, the City of Launceston 4-year delivery plan. This is the 23 edition. The recommendation is that Council endorses the City of Launceston 4-year delivery plan. Do I have somebody to move the recommendation? Councillor Dr. Raze. Seconder, Councillor Harris. Councillor Dr. Raze, would you like to speak as the mover?
I'm so pleased to look at the detailed action plans and priority for the Launceston City Council for the next 4 years. I'm particularly pleased that our council has reaffirmed its commitment to support and improve community health and well-being. It showed that it's acknowledged that preventive health is crucial for the well-being of Launcestonians. This is highlighted in strategy priority number 5, under we serve and care for our community. And the council is investing in our community long-term health and well-being. And over the 10 years goal the goal of the council is to promote and support an active and healthy lifestyle for this community. And the council have already showed commitment in promoting this by organizing a community health workshop, which was done on the 8th of June, and in collaboration with the University of Tasmania. I am really delighted that the community health and well-being has become strategic priority, not just for council, but all state and federal governments. And I believe that we should work together with the community, with the University of Tasmania and state federal government to address how we can improve the health of community and create healthy, happy and active community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dr. Raze. Councillor Harris?
Thank you. And just to follow on from Dr. Raze's comments, it's good to see that a large number of projects have been identified, but also actions that will be taken in the next year and the years that follow that this 4-year plan covers, to help make some progress on some long-running items, and certainly some that I've been well across and have championed, such as within the transport strategy and where that will take us, along with capital being put aside for the development of the new pump track at a site yet to be determined, but nevertheless $500,000 for that, along with the development of the South Prospect Development Roads network to enable that subdivision to proceed in a sensible manner rather than somewhat of an ad hoc manner that most subdivisions tend to happen. So there are many things in there for anyone to read, but I do think for myself there are a couple of things that I look forward to being implemented in the next year, if that can be achieved. Obviously, the problem of resources still stops some of the work being done. Hence, that's why we had so much carried forward from last year in the previous item. But always good to have a plan. Not everything in a plan ever gets done, but the fact that you've planned to do it usually makes sure some of it gets done. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Harris. Around the table, Deputy Mayor.
Look, I applaud the council for having such a document. I think page 7, if you look at it, how this plan builds up from the Greater Launceston Plan down to the Strategic Asset Management Plan, long-term financial plan, corporate strategic plan, down to the 4-year, down to annual plans. To me, that's what's critical about it, and it's what the 12 of us around this table really can sit there and say, over our 4 years on council, this is what we've signed up to achieve. Some of these are multi-year projects, so they're not all going to happen at once. They'll take time over the period, and hopefully by the end of the 4-year plan, we'll have achieved a large percentage of that. And the reason I say a large percentage as opposed to all of it, it'd be great if everything in the world was perfect, but it's not. So I think as time goes by, as things happen, as things change in the world, credit crisis, whatever might go on, things will pop up. We say, well, it makes sense either not to do that because of something else that's happened, or it may make sense that we do something else as well. But I think by having a 4-year plan narrative, at least it gives us something for ourselves to focus on, keep ourselves and our officers accountable to in relation to the delivery of it, and keep our community informed on what we're actually doing on their behalf. So this is the value of plans in sense. As the old adage goes, you fail to plan, you plan to fail, sometimes works out well. And I think that that's what's held this council in good stead over the years that I've been involved, is their improved planning cycles so that we actually know what we're doing. We as councillors are informed, we can inquire, we can challenge, we can do all sorts of things in relation to it, but we then settle down and we say this is what we're going to do, and we move forward with it, and then we put that in the charge of our officers to actually deliver on most of it. So I think it's a really good document. It's well articulated. There's wriggle room within what's there to enable us to sort of change a little bit as we go through. There's an end objective, but the way we get there might not necessarily be the way we planned at the beginning. But ultimately, there's a really good strategy behind what we're doing and why we're doing it. And I think that's what makes this city a great place.
Any other speakers to the item? Councillor Walker.
Thank you. And there is, thank you, Chair, there is something in there for everyone, really. And the more you look, the more you find. I suppose there is that wriggle room, I suppose you could talk about that. But, you know, strategically, things are balanced so that, you know, one thing has to come before another when it comes to the development. But what I suppose, thinking quite laterally, and I challenge people to look at this and decide whether there's opportunities sometimes for things to overlap and to support each other. For example, our open space policy that's due for review at the moment, which leads into the greening of Launceston, could be also something that taps into our homeless action plan, for example. There are opportunities where we can leave an effect in one area from the work that we do in another. And I think that is probably where we're getting towards with this, and I'm sure I'm not saying anything that nobody doesn't already know, but I'm challenging people to find those opportunities where they may lie. And I certainly would encourage the people of Launceston to look at this 4-year plan and the annual plan actions, because it gives, as my previous speaker, said, that clear view of where we're heading as an organisation and as a community. But at the same time, it gives us that flexibility when we need it to investigate further in one area than we do in another. So I suppose that's my observations. We all have, a personal interests and things on council that with the reasons that we're here, including seeing the conclusion of our a heritage study and listing of precincts For me, you know, an Aboriginal partnership plan and seeing us build upon that. Certainly those open spaces being reviewed, especially in suburban areas where there's more and more pressure that will develop, whether it be Newstead, Kings Meadows, Mowbray or St Leonard's. Seeing those things come to fruition so that we can share the benefits the values that we espouse can be shared across the greater Launceston region. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Councillor Dr Raze, would you like to close? Nothing further? Okay. Putting the motion to the vote. All of those in favour? That is all councillors present. The motion is carried. Agenda item 16, meeting closure at 1:20. The next meeting will be on the 24th of August here at 1 p.m. Quick one. I didn't.